Hello everyone, my name is Coach Tickety, and today we're going to be talking about something that is so crucial to improving at Overwatch, learning from your mistakes. And to do that, we're going to be going through the replay viewer, talking about some settings you should be using to maximize your time there, and talking about the best practices to actually review your own play and learn from any mistakes you see there. As a professional coach, I'm in Overwatch's replay viewer every single day of my life. I've spent countless hours reviewing gameplay there, and it is such an invaluable tool to really get the whole picture of any situations you might encounter in game. But before we go any further, you guys should know that if you're really looking to improve your game, if you really want to rank up this season, then you should head over to GameLeap.com. Over on our website, you will find hundreds of guides made by top-level coaches and more being added every single week that go super in-depth about anything you want to know about the game. So whether you're picking up a new hero or trying to master your way to the top of the leaderboards, you will find something on our website to help you reach your goals. So check out the link below this video or just head on over to GameLeap.com right now and get your membership started today. Alright, now let's talk about the replay viewer. And just in case there's some people out there who have never used this tool before, here's how you get access to it. Every time you play a game in Overwatch 2, it will save a code of the game you just played, whether that's unranked, competitive, arcade, or even some custom games. You can view these codes by going to your career profile in the menus, going to the history tab, and then going down to the replays tab. This menu will show you your 10 most recently played games and allow you to view them by clicking on them and then clicking on the view button at the bottom of the screen. If you want to save a certain map, you can click the pin button and then any new games you play won't overwrite that code. And if you want to share these codes with someone else to take a look at, you just need to hit the share button at the bottom of the screen, which will generate a 6-character code, which can just be copy-pasted and then imported in someone else's client. These replay codes will work on any client, so you can share codes across PC to console and vice versa, but do keep in mind that every time there's a major patch, these replays will get wiped. Even if they're pinned in your history, even if you have the codes written down, these will no longer be valid every time there's a major patch like we just saw with the mid-season update. Alright, one more thing to check out before we hop into the replay viewer itself, and that's some control settings. So check out the options menu, head over to the controls under replay and spectate tabs. You'll want to set some keybinds here to make sure that you can pause, back up, move forward, as well as increase or decrease playback speed in the replay viewer. I promise you this will make using the replay viewer so much easier. You won't have to be opening up menus as you're using it, and you don't have to click any buttons. Just hit some buttons on your keyboard or controller and you'll be zooming through these replays in no time. Everything else in these settings is pretty much user preference, but one thing I highly recommend doing is also setting a keybind to showing health bars while you're in game. This way, when you're zooming out, flying away from first-person view in the replay viewer, you'll be able to see individual health bars above the heroes. Alright, with those settings out of the way, let's talk about some good practices we should be looking for when reviewing our own gameplay. So my first tip here is that you shouldn't be reviewing every map you play. One, because this will prove to be very boring and time consuming. You shouldn't be reviewing every single map you play, that would take forever. But two, this is also important because not every game you play will actually be worth reviewing. There's some obvious examples here, like if you had a lever in your game or if there's someone actively throwing your games, it's not worth breaking down all those situations and trying to learn from them. It's better to just forget about them and move on to the next game. But similarly, we also don't need to study every game that feels very one-sided. So if our team is just dominating or if the enemy team is just full holding us in our spawns, those are going to be hard games to learn from as well. Not because you won't be making mistakes and you can't be breaking down those things, but because the mistakes you make probably don't become the biggest difference in those games. You want to review the games where your impact is felt, where it felt like you had the opportunity to actually carry your games, not just a game that's on autopilot and it was destined for one team to win just from the matchmaker. After that, if you can get rid of those outliers, pretty much any map is up for grabs at that point. You can review anything and learn from it, I promise you. Even if you're the best player in the world, you will be making mistakes in every game you play, and you can try to eliminate those mistakes and do better next time. So now that we've eliminated some games altogether, we're going to try and save even more time. Once we found a good map to review, we're not going to review the whole thing. So my next tip is to focus on specific moments of your games, not the entire game altogether. Now, if you are reviewing with someone else, maybe a fellow player that you wanted to share your code with, or a coach that you've hired to review your gameplay, it can be worth it to go over an entire map just so that extra person has context around your decision making and what you went through in that game. But you as a player should have a good idea of what your playstyle looks like, what your habits are, what common mistakes you might be making, and you should be trying to pinpoint those moments when you're reviewing your own gameplay. And the number one thing you'll be looking for to pinpoint these moments is every time you die in game. So if you've got nothing else to look for, if you load up the replay viewer and you just feel completely lost, what I'd recommend is just bumping up the speed to 2 times or just skipping through the game until you see yourself back in the spawn room. Go back 20 seconds, see what led up to that moment, and try to break it down yourself. Remember, our goal here is to eliminate any mistakes from our play, and if we find ourselves dying, it's probably because we made some kind of a mistake. So go back to look at those moments, ask yourself, okay, did I position well enough? Did I use my cooldowns appropriately? Did I account for enough enemy threats? Or was I overexposed, out of resources, and trying to 1v5? For more advanced players, we won't just be looking at our deaths, but we'll be looking at opportunities where we might have missed out on aggressive opportunities. So for most of those situations, we'll be looking at as many team fights as possible and looking at the moments that led into our individual play during that team fight. How did our positioning look? Did our cooldowns find enough value? Did we have access to enough targets? All that kind of stuff. And that'll lead me to my next tip, and that's to ignore your mechanics when you're reviewing your gameplay. It's very common for players to notice a mistake they've made, but then think to themselves, oh, this would have worked out if I had just hit a few more shots. We want to eliminate that line of thinking altogether. We don't want to be thinking about mechanics pretty much at all when we're using the replay viewer. This doesn't mean that we aren't going to be working on our mechanics. Of course, mechanics are important to the game and to improvement, but you're not going to be able to do anything to improve just by beating yourself up after watching yourself whiff an entire clip into the enemy team. If we want to focus on mechanics, that's what aim trainers, aim warm-ups, and even in-game custom workshop codes are for. We can use all those different types of tools to grind out our mechanics and get more comfortable with our aim. So instead, when we're in the replay viewer, when we ignore mechanics, we're instead going to look for two areas: information and decision making. So again, when you're going back over those deaths or those team fights in the replay viewer, ask yourself in every situation, what kind of information do you have and what kind of decisions are you making based on that information? If you're not making active decisions based on any information, that's what we call autopiloting, and that's one of the biggest mistakes that any player can make because they're not thinking about the game, they're just running in with their gun ready and trying to find kills. And unfortunately, Overwatch is a little bit more complicated than that. And to go a little bit more in depth so you guys know what specifically you should be looking for, when it comes to information, you want to isolate who are your biggest threats, as well as who are your best targets that you want to be shooting at or putting pressure on. And for decision making, you want to be asking yourself what kind of positions you're taking and how you're using your cooldowns or ultimates. So let's take an example here. Let's say I'm reviewing my own play and I'm playing DPS and there's a moment where I die to the enemy Reinhardt as a tank. So here I can isolate, well, my biggest threat in this moment was the enemy Reinhardt. So what did I do about that? If I go back 20 seconds, maybe I recognize, oh, I stood too close in the front line, I was too out in the open, and I wasn't ready for his shatter. I didn't have enough information because I didn't know he had shatter, and I didn't make enough active decision making to reposition away from that threat. These are mistakes I can now try to avoid in the future by asking myself, okay, am I at enough range to deal with a Reinhardt, and do I know if he has shatter or not? And this is pretty easy to do when the threat like that is pretty obvious, when it's a pretty clear mistake you've made and there's a clear solution to that problem. But what happens when the information is a little bit muddied, when you're reviewing your POV and you can't really tell what was going on, and so you died just because you got lost? So here my next tip is to review more than just your point of view when you're in the replay viewer. So there's three areas here we'll talk about: using third-person view or just zooming out so you can see the whole battlefield, using your teammate's point of view so you can see how your actions are affecting them, and using the enemy's point of view, especially the point of view of someone who might have outplayed you or killed you themselves. Starting with third-person view, this is the best way to get the biggest picture about the team fight possible. You'll be able to see all members on both teams and be able to track their movements in real time, so you'll be able to see moments where you might have split away from your team, where you might have missed an opportunity to catch someone out on the enemy team, things like that. One of the biggest things you'll be looking for here is how you can change your positioning based around safe space. So what space is determined to be safe changes very quickly in an Overwatch team fight. So if the enemy team starts pushing into you, you've got less safe space, but if they start backing up, you'll have more safe space to work with. If you're not taking advantage of that space, if you're lagging behind when you should be pushing, if you're slow to react when you should be backing up, you're either going to be missing out on opportunities or going to get caught out alone by yourself. So using the third-person view, you'll be able to track these moments and look for those opportunities to play more aggressive or more defensively accordingly. And again, calling back to our previous point, what you're looking for here is the information about enemy positioning and maybe cooldown usage and how that will affect your decision making around your positioning. Next, let's talk about our teammates' POVs, and this is something I highly recommend to tank players especially. Since you usually find yourself at the front of your team's positioning and you're the one charging into battle to lead them to victory, it can be very easy to find yourself disconnected from your teammates, whether they're DPS or support players, which means you won't get the follow-up damage you need to finish a kill, and you might not get healed enough to survive in a team fight. If this feels familiar, you should be looking at your teammates' POV to see how your movements and your actions are affecting them. They might be doing everything they can to keep up with you, but you might just be going too far away, or there's too many enemies in their path that prevent them from moving forward to be able to move at your pace. So a quick trip to the replay viewer can clear up these confusions where you felt like you were going at pace with the team, you were doing your job as a tank, but then all of a sudden you're recognizing, oh, your entire team's across the map, or they're getting killed themselves before you can realize and do anything about it. By recognizing these moments in the replay viewer itself, it might help you slow down your pacing in game and then take more information in before you decide to go all in. And finally, talking about using the enemy's point of view, you want to do this because you might be doing things unknowingly that are making you a prime target for enemy DPS or even tank and support players. If you find yourself getting constantly outdueled by an enemy Genji, maybe take a look at his point of view to see how he's making that play. He might have noticed you're out of position and away from your team, or that you've used an important cooldown that won't be able to help you defensively before he jumps in. Or maybe you're playing tank and you keep getting slept by the enemy Ana. Maybe if you swap over to her POV, you might recognize some patterns that you're showing her that make you a more vulnerable target than you're intending. Whatever the case and whatever POVs you're looking at here, the goal is to provide as much information where you didn't have it before. And since we're playing a first-person shooter, there's very limited information you get when you're actually in game. You can only see what's directly in front of you. So the replay viewer can definitely help clear up those situations and at least answer any questions you might have had in the moment, and therefore give you more tools to help fix those mistakes in the future. As a professional Overwatch coach, I cannot stress enough how important gathering all this information is to actually improving as a player. You're not going to get anywhere if you're blind to your mistakes, and the replay viewer can show you the light. And again, this isn't something that needs to take forever to do. You can come out of a game that felt close, felt competitive to you, ask yourself how you could have done better, spend 5-10 minutes in the replay viewer reviewing specific moments, deaths, team fights, that kind of stuff, and then be better for it. You'll probably notice a thing or two you weren't thinking of before, and then you'll be able to incorporate changes into your gameplay that makes you a better player. So if you're out there grinding this season, trying to do everything you can to climb, I hope this video inspires you to check out the replay viewer, and maybe you'll find a few mistakes that you can easily correct that helps propel you to the top. There's truly no better way to improve as a player, that is, except for signing up for GameLeap.com. Don't forget that over on our website, you will find hundreds of guides made by top-level coaches. This is really in-depth stuff you won't find anywhere else. This is more in-depth than your average YouTube video and stuff like that, and these will talk about anything you want to know about the game, whether that's fundamentals or in-depth hero courses with step-by-step guides. We've even got some in-depth VOD reviews led by our coaches that show them using the replay viewer firsthand, so you'll be able to see all the things we talked about in this video in action. So click on that link below the video, or just head over to GameLeap.com and get your membership started today. That's going to be it for me today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.